They called him the weak trapper, the kind of man the North erases without a headline. And yet, in one frozen week on the far edge of the American-Canadian frontier, the men who came to break him would learn something frightening. Weakness can be a disguise, and the Arctic sometimes protects its own. Before the snow closes over this trail, subscribe to the channel. Here we tell historical mystery stories from the old frontier, where one small act can summon consequences bigger than a rifle shot. If you like kindness-rewarded tales with unexpected allies, hit subscribe, tap like, and comment what you would do if you found a stranger dying in the snow. His name was Elias Mercer. He ran a lonely winter trap line along a remote trade route between scattered posts, days from help. He wasn't Inuit, and he didn't pretend to be. To many, he was simply a Kalunat drifter, an outsider who survived by keeping his fire small and his tracks fewer than the wind's. That's the contradiction. The North rewards the unseen, but the only reason Elias would survive what was coming was because he did the one thing that made him visible. The wind that night came hard and dry, scraping snow across the ice like grit. Elias was heading for a hidden cache, food and tinder covered under stones, when he noticed a dark smear on the drift. At first, he thought fox blood. Then he saw the pattern: stumble, crawl, stumble. Human. He followed with his lamp shuttered, heart thudding with frontier math. If it's a trap, you die. If it's real, you might die anyway. Behind a boulder, half sheltered from the wind, lay a girl. Young, small, wrapped in a fur-lined parka with an Amauti-style pouch. Ice clung to the hem. Her braid was loose, stiff with frost. One hand was bare, fingers cracked and shaking. Beside her, half buried, was a snapped strap from a Kamutik sled. Her eyes opened the moment he knelt. Not fear. Assessment. She glanced once at his knife, then at his hands, like she was measuring the kind of man he was. Elias knew that look. The land judging you through someone else's stare. He could have walked away. Men did. They called it survival. Elias even told himself he was that kind of man. Weak, yes, but not foolish. Instead, he set his pack down. He warmed snow in a cup, let it melt, and offered it in his palm. She drank slowly, controlled, as if proving she would not take more than needed. He gave her a strip of dried fish. She chewed without gratitude, without performance, only necessity. From his pocket, he pulled a small bone toggle he'd traded for months earlier, carved like an Inuksuk. An elder had said, in rough English, "This points the way when storms lie." Elias had kept it as a reminder. The Arctic has rules older than any map. He placed it in her palm. Her fingers closed around it as if it mattered. Elias made a fire in the lee of the rock, not a signal, just an ember against death. He wrapped her hand, cleaned the cut on her temple, and watched her breathing until it steadied. When he looked up again, the wind had shifted. The girl was already standing. She rose too quietly for someone half frozen, swayed once, then straightened. She adjusted her parka, tucked the bone charm inside, and met his eyes. Her lips parted as if to speak. Then she chose silence. A choice, not a weakness. She stepped backward into the falling snow and vanished so completely it felt like the land swallowed her on purpose. Elias stamped out his fire and headed for his cabin with a new fear, worse than hunger. The fear of being noticed by people who moved through blizzards like they were born from them. And on the ridge above his cache, he saw it for a heartbeat, a line of stones that hadn't been there before, set with care, pointing toward his door. Elias told himself it was nothing. A trick of drifting snow. A random cairn made by some earlier traveler. The North loves to turn ordinary shapes into omens, especially when you're tired, hungry, and alone. That was the contradiction gnawing at him. He'd survived these routes by staying invisible, yet a single kindness had made the wilderness feel crowded. The next morning he walked his line as if the world hadn't changed. He checked the sets along the creek mouth, reset a snare where the wind had collapsed it, and followed the familiar logic of his work. Sign, track, distance, patience. But the land had begun answering back in a different language. Near his first dead fall, he found a stone figure where there hadn't been one the day before. 3 flat rocks stacked with an upright slab, simple and deliberate. not just a hunter's marker. It looked like an inuksuk, the kind that points the way when horizons blur. The kind elders build to say safe route, or do not go here, or sometimes simply, someone passed and cared enough to leave order behind. He crouched, touched the top stone, and felt the sting of cold through his glove. No fresh tool marks, no casual pile. The placement had intention. Later, on a ridge overlooking a frozen inlet, 2 ravens circled above him, low, patient, almost bored. Ravens always watched, but these kept pace when he moved, as if escorting. Inuit stories called them clever, sometimes mischievous, sometimes helpful, messengers that noticed what humans missed. Elias had laughed at that once in a trading post. He wasn't laughing now. He reached his cache and found it undisturbed. The leather lashings were tight, the stones hadn't shifted, yet the snow around it carried faint lines, parallel grooves that didn't belong to wolf or fox. He brushed gently with the back of his mitten and felt his stomach tighten. Sled runners. A kamutik had passed within yards of his supplies and left without taking anything. No theft, no warning shot. Just a trace, as if to say, we could have. Elias stood there a long time listening to nothing but wind. In the old posts, men said if Inuit wanted you gone, you'd simply become a story told once and then forgotten. But this wasn't a hunt. It was surveillance. He tried to reason it away. Trappers built stone piles too. Travelers used ravens as luck charms. Tracks appeared and vanished. The Arctic was full of coincidences. Then he found the second marker, farther down his line, near a narrow pass where whiteouts turned men around. This one was not an inuksuk shape at all. It was a line, 5 stones laid like stepping points across a drift, a subtle path that led away from thin ice. Elias followed it, heart thumping, and discovered a dark stretch where the snow sagged over a melt pocket. One bad step there, and he'd be swallowed. Someone had saved him without ever showing a face. By dusk he returned to his cabin, shoulders tight, senses stretched thin. He kept his fire small the way he always had, and ate in silence. Outside, the night pressed close. The ravens settled somewhere unseen, and the dogs far off, if they even existed, didn't bark. When he opened the door to Dumpash, he saw a single object sitting on his threshold. A strip of caribou hide, cleanly cut, tied in a simple knot. Not a gift for comfort. A signal. In the trading posts, he'd heard the idea spoken softly, Pilirika Tiginik, people bound together because the land demands it. Elias brought it inside and stared at it until the lamp burned low. He finally understood the worst part. He was not alone out here. And sometime after midnight, through the frost on the window, he saw a shadow pause on the ridge, then another, silent as falling snow. By dawn, Elias knew what terrified him most. If they wanted him dead, he would already be cold. The contradiction was undeniable. He felt threatened, yet nothing had touched him. No stolen cash, no broken latch, no warning shot. Only the heavy certainty of eyes in the white. That meant intention. He stepped outside to split wood and found the snow around his cabin combed by movement so careful it looked like wind work. Tracks came close, then veered away. Not the frantic scuff of raiders, not the wide boot prints of traders. These were light, disciplined, mukluk souls, sled teams kept at a distance, a circle drawn without announcing itself. Elias kept his knife on his belt anyway. He set snares near the tree line, forced his hands to act normal, and pretended the forest had not become a room with people standing in its corners. When the sun climbed weakly, he heard a sound he hadn't heard in weeks, a low call, brief, answered from another direction. Not a shout. A signal, then silence again, as if silence itself was the rule. By mid-afternoon the circle tightened. He saw them only in fragments, a shoulder behind a spruce, a dark line on a ridge, a figure that was there only as long as he wasn't staring. He lifted his rifle once, not to aim, just to test what would happen. Nothing happened. No return aim. No rush. No threat. That was when he understood. This was not an attack. It was a waiting. In the posts, old Inuit men had spoken about Malagite. the things you must follow so the world doesn't break. They didn't talk like priests, and they didn't need paper laws. The land was the law, and one rule sat beneath all the others. You don't survive alone. You survive by how you treat others when it costs you. Sharing food, sharing warmth, sharing truth. Inungwinik, one elder had called it, the way you become fully human. Elias had thought those were fine words for gatherings he'd never attend, but now his cabin felt like a kagik without a roof, a place where your actions are remembered, weighed, and repeated. The first proof came at dusk. He found a fresh seal of snow packed into a small mound near his door, smoothed by a mittened hand. At its center lay a thin willow switch bent into a circle, a quiet boundary, a message. We are close and we are calm. He did not cross it. He boiled tea, set a second cup beside the stove, then hated himself for the gesture. Who leaves tea for shadows? Yet he remembered the girl's eyes, the way she had measured his hands. This was the same measurement, widened to a community. The night deepened, the wind eased. In the stillness, Elias heard faint breathing, many breaths, carried and lost between trees. He could not see them, but he could feel the shape of them, like pressure around a flame. He tried to sleep with his boots on. He woke to a soft scraping, not at the door, along the side wall. When he held his breath, the scraping stopped. After a long minute, a small object slid across the floorboards and came to rest beside his hearth, as if pushed through a crack. A bead, not glass trade beads like the posts sold, but carved bone, warm-colored, with a tiny drilled hole, handmade, patient, the kind of thing made during long dark nights when stories are told and hands stay busy. Elias stared at it until his eyes burned. He could finally name what was happening. His cabin was not being surrounded to be taken, it was being surrounded to be judged. And in the silence outside, someone was deciding whether the man who gave water would keep choosing the same way, when fear made the choice expensive. Elias stopped pretending after the third night. The patient ring around his cabin had become as real as his own heartbeat. No shouting, no threats, just a disciplined presence that turned his home into a place of judgment. He woke before dawn to the sound of his latch lifting, then settling back, gentle as a test. He swung his lamp up, rifle half raised, and froze. Someone stood inside. It was the girl he had found by the boulder, only now she looked composed, rebuilt by cold. Her parka was brushed clean, fur ruff glittering with ice. The amouti pouch sat high on her back, empty now, and her braid was tied tight. She held her hands open to show she carried no blade. Elias lowered his rifle an inch, not because he trusted her, but because the way she stood told him this. If violence was the plan, it would not begin with her. Her eyes flicked to the extra cup by his stove. "You give water," she said, each word careful. "No ask. Trade." Her English was rough, shaped by posts and passing ships, yet her calm belonged to another world. She tapped her chest once. "Aputi," she added. Name or snow? Elias didn't know. Then she nodded toward the dark window. "They watch," she said. "Not to take, to know." "To know what?" Elias asked. Aputi searched for words, then mimed pouring water into her palm and holding it out again, sharing the simplest rule on earth. "Piliri katiginik," she said slowly. "We do together, we live." The word tightened everything he'd seen, the stone markers that steered him from thin ice, the untouched cache, the ravens that kept pace. Elias had lived by staying small, owing nothing. Now he understood that in the north, owing nothing can mean having no one. Aputi glanced at his lamp and kettle. "Kulik," she said, the Inuit oil lamp, then gestured to his flame. "Light is life, but loud light calls trouble." Her tone carried a lesson. Don't waste warmth, don't waste food, don't waste words. "Maligait," she added, "rules older than paper." Elias swallowed. "So this circle is law?" "Not punishment," Aputi said. "A question. When nobody sees you, who are you?" She tapped the leather. "Some men share, then sell. We watch to know which man lives in the cabin." Her gaze held him a moment longer, like an elder weighing a story for truth. Then she breathed out and continued. Aputi's eyes moved to his shelves. Pelts, dried meat, line, tea. Storm comes, she said. Hunger comes. If you keep all, you die alone. If you share, people remember. She placed something on his table, a thin strip of leather with 2 knots, the same pattern he'd found on his threshold. Now it looked less like a gift and more like a measure. 2 knots, 2 questions he could feel without hearing. Will you share? Will you lie? Aputi pointed south, where the trade route ran like a faint scar through snow. Men come, she said. They carry paper. They say land is theirs. They ask you, where are we? Elias felt his stomach drop. How do you... She shook her head once. We see, we hear. Snow keeps story of feet. Then softer, urgent. They think you are weak. Do not make loud. Do not point. Do not sell us for safety. She stepped toward the door, paused, and touched the small bone Inuksuk toggle he'd given her, now hanging at her throat. You gave water, she said again, quieter. So I speak. Outside, first light bled into the sky. Elias caught a heartbeat glimpse of dark figures shifting on the ridges like sentinels. Then the forest swallowed them. The ring was still there, waiting. And far down the trail came a sound that didn't belong to ravens or wind, the creak of sled runners, mixed with the heavier crunch of many boots. The sound reached Elias before the men did, boots grinding snow into a hard rhythm, the kind of noise that announced ownership, not of land, but of confidence. He watched from his doorway as figures emerged from the pale morning, first 6, then more. Heavy coats, frosted moustaches, rifles carried openly, not for hunting but for persuasion. They looked at his cabin the way traders look at a lonely cache, as a thing that should cooperate. The leader came forward on snowshoes, broad-shouldered, a fur cap pulled low. 2 men behind him dragged a small sled with a crate stamped in black, a company mark meant to command respect. Mercer, the leader called, as if Elias belonged to his ledger. You the trapper on this line? Elias kept his hands visible. He felt the ring of unseen watchers beyond the tree line, silent as a held breath. The contradiction sharpened. He was safest when alone, yet he had never been less alone than now. That's me, he said. The leader produced folded paper from inside his coat. It crackled like dry leaves, strange music in a world that spoke in wind. He waved it once, not to show Elias the words, but to show he had them. By authority of the company and the crown, he said, the phrase practiced, we're investigating thefts from the southern post. Pelts missing, ammunition missing. 2 men swear they saw Kamutik runner tracks near the route. That means camps, that means someone sheltering thieves. He let the word thieves hang like bait. One of the men spit. They hide like ghosts, he muttered. But a man like you, Kalunat, alone sees things. Elias glanced at the papers. He could read enough to know how language worked. It didn't describe reality. It created it. Paper laws, Aputi had warned. Here they were, rules written far away, carried north like a weapon. I don't know about thefts, Elias said carefully. I keep my own line. The leader smiled without warmth. You keep your line because the company lets you, but you'll answer questions. He unfolded a second sheet, ink blurred by damp. This is a warrant to search, he said, and this, he tapped another page, is an order to detain any person aiding unlawful tribes. Unlawful tribes. The phrase sounded filthy against clean snow. The posse began drifting around the cabin, boots circling like wolves testing a fence. One man lifted the lid of Elias's woodbox with a casual shove. Another kicked at pelts, pretending it was inspection. A third studied the tree line as if he could intimidate the dark itself. Elias remembered the carved bead by his hearth, the leather strip with 2 knots. Aputi's warning, do not point, do not sell us for safety. The leader stepped close enough for Elias to smell tobacco and wet wool. You've seen Inuit, he said, voice low now, friendly in the way a blade is friendly when it's sheathed. Where do they hole up? Across the inlet? Up the pass? Give us a direction. That's all. No trouble for you. Elias forced himself to breathe slowly. If he lied badly, they'd know. If he told the truth, people would die. He needed another path, like stones across thin ice. He shrugged. Small. He let them keep believing weak meant simple. I saw tracks days ago, he said. Could have been anyone. Wind eats sign fast. The leader's eyes narrowed. "Don't play dumb, Mercer." A raven called once from somewhere high. Another answered farther off, a patient echo. The men didn't notice, but Elias did. The ring was listening, and the posse, hungry for certainty, began to drift toward the ridge, toward the wrong place, toward a silence that suddenly felt like a trap set for them instead of him. Elias let the leader's words hang in the cold air, then answered with the smallest truth he could afford. "There's a cut through the spruce," he said, pointing with his chin, not his hand, toward a low saddle in the hills. "Old portage line. Men used it before the ice thickened. If you're chasing runner tracks, that's where you'd see them." It was true that a portage existed. It was also true that no Inuit camp waited there now. The place led to bad ground, wind-scoured rock, thin snow, and a stretch of ice that looked solid until it wasn't. A lesson the land taught quickly. Elias hated himself for even guiding them toward danger, but he hated the alternative more. A half-truth, sharpened into a shield. The leader studied him like a man reading a ledger. "Why so nervous, Mercer?" "I'm not," Elias lied, and his voice almost held. "I just don't want trouble." "Trouble already came north," the leader said. He nodded to one of the men who lifted a rifle slightly, casual as a yawn. "You're going to walk with us. You'll point when we ask." Elias's stomach tightened. Walk with them and he becomes a compass. Refuse and he becomes an example. He remembered Aputi's words, "Pilirikatiginik, we live by each other." And the older idea behind it, Maligite, the rules that keep the world from breaking. He had always believed strength was a full belly and a loaded gun. Out here, strength could be restraint. He stepped backward into his doorway as if to fetch a coat, then stopped and raised both palms. "I'll come," he said, "but I won't cross the inlet today. Ice is wrong. You'll lose men." The leader's smile returned, sharper. "Now you're worried about us? That's new." "It's not kindness," Elias said. "It's common sense. The North doesn't care what your paper says." That line earned him a hard shove to the chest. He stumbled against the doorframe, caught himself, and saw the flash of satisfaction in the men's eyes. Weak, easy. Then from the tree line a sound, soft, like a throat clearing. The posse froze. The leader lifted a hand for silence, head turning. Elias heard nothing more than wind, but he saw what they did not. The ravens on the ridge had shifted, spacing themselves like markers, and beyond them, far enough to be doubtful, close enough to tighten the skin, dark shapes stood perfectly still. One of the men laughed too loudly. "Just trees." A second sound came, answered from another angle. Not a shout, a signal, then nothing again, as if silence was being used like a rope. The leader's confidence wavered for the first time. He scanned the slopes, trying to pin the world down with his eyes. "Show yourselves," he called, instantly regretting it when the hills gave him no reply. Elias swallowed. This was the moment that could become blood. He forced his voice steady. "If you're here for thieves, you're looking in the wrong place," he said. "If you're here to make war, you brought too few." The men bristled. A rifle came up. Another man's hand went to his belt knife. The leader stared at Elias as if suddenly unsure whether the weak trapper had been weak at all. In the pale distance, a single figure moved. Just one step, then stillness again. A message without words. "We are many, and we are calm." Elias felt the circle tighten, not around him, but around them. And as the posse began to back toward the cabin without admitting fear, the leader's eyes landed on something near Elias's threshold. Two simple knots in a strip of caribou hide, half buried in snow, like a verdict waiting to be read. Even the air felt crowded with attention from the hills. The leader's men drifted closer to Elias's cabin, as if boards could keep out whatever the hills were holding. Rifles hovered half-raised, unsure whether to become threats or prayers. Elias stood between them and the tree line with his palms open, feeling the absurd weight of being the only loud thing in a world that had chosen quiet. A raven called once, then silence swallowed it. The posse leader's eyes kept flicking from the two knotted leather strips near the threshold to the ridges beyond, as if trying to translate a language he had never respected. Then the white began to move. It wasn't a rush. It was a reveal. Figures appeared first as dark marks on the snow, then as people. Inuit hunters stepping from behind spruce and boulders, emerging from dips in the land where light couldn't reach. They came in measured intervals, never bunching, never running, spacing themselves like markers on a safe route. Some held rifles low, others carried harpoons and long knives kept sheathed. Nobody yelled, nobody aimed. The posse's bravado drained away. Someone whispered, "How many?" Elias counted without meaning to. 10, 20, 50, more unfolding from the land in patient geometry. When the last line settled, he realized the circle wasn't a circle at all. It was a shield, placed to control angles, to prevent panic, to keep one reckless shot from becoming a storm. He finished the count. 134. The leader's mouth opened, then closed. His paper orders fluttered in his fist, suddenly fragile. From the center line, an older man stepped forward alone. Frost clung to his hair at the temples. His parka was trimmed with worn fur, his posture straight with an authority that didn't need to announce itself. Around his neck hung a carved piece of bone in the shape of an inuksuk, polished by years. He stopped at a respectful distance, far enough that no one could claim he threatened first. Aputi moved beside him and spoke softly. The elder nodded once, then looked at the posse leader, the way the land looks at an overconfident traveler. Without anger, only certainty. He spoke in Inuktitut, calm and even. Aputi translated, "You came with paper laws. Here we live by Malagite, the rules that keep people alive." The elder lifted his palm, indicating the rifles and the way the men had circled the cabin. Another short sentence. Aputi's jaw tightened. "You accuse thieves," she said. "But you enter a man's home, you push him, you threaten him. You break the code before you ask the question." The posse leader forced a scoff. "This is crown business. Move." The elder did not move. He spoke again, longer this time. Aputi's voice sharpened as she translated. "He says Inungwinik, being a real human, means you do not take by fear. You do not make the weak pay for your hunger. You do not hunt people because your pride is cold." Elias felt the words strike him too. Weak. The elder used it without contempt, like a fact about winter. Weak people still deserved protection. The elder turned his gaze to Elias and said a short phrase. Aputi's tone softened. "He remembers the water," she said. "You gave it without trade. That act was seen. That act was told." The ring of hunters remained still, but the posse could feel it. Every twitch of a trigger finger, witnessed. The elder spread both hands empty and spoke one final time. Aputi translated like a verdict laid gently on the snow. "You will not hunt today," she said. "You will leave this place alive, because we are not here for blood. We are here for balance." Balance. The word hung between cabin and ridgeline, and Elias understood the next danger. Restraint offered by a disciplined shield meant the outsiders had already crossed a line that demanded an answer. The posse leader's knuckles whitened around his papers, as if ink could stop what snow had decided. His men shifted, trying to hide fear behind steel. The elder spoke once more, not louder, final. At that cue, the ring tightened by half a step. No rush, only geometry. Two hunters approached the nearest rifleman with palms open, showing empty hands first. "We could take you, but we won't give you an excuse for panic." "Put them down," Aputi translated. "Barrels to the snow." The leader scoffed, then met 134 calm eyes. He hesitated. Elias watched the choice form, pride or survival. Pride loses quickly in the Arctic. One by one, the posse lowered their rifles. Metal ticked against ice crust. Hunters collected each weapon with practiced care, checking chambers, removing powder and shot. Nothing was smashed. The disarmament felt like knives being removed from a crowded room. The elder turned to the crate on the sled, the company mark. He spoke to Aputi, who faced the leader. "You came to take," she said. "Now you will pay back what you bring to others." The leader's face flushed. "We haven't taken—" Aputi cut him off. "Your men pushed this cabin. They threatened. Fear is taking." Two hunters opened the crate. Tea, flour, shot, a roll of bright cloth. Things meant to buy obedience at the posts. The elder gestured toward Elias's shelves, thin supplies, and then toward the trail south. "Restitution," Aputi said. "Not for him alone." Half the goods were laid on Elias's table: flour, tea, grease, spare flint, a coil of line. Not charity, payment for danger dragged to his door. The rest was repacked and tied to a second sled that had been waiting unseen. "For families," Aputi said, "for the ones you call thieves when they only took what kept children breathing." The posse watched their authority get unpacked and redistributed like a lie being peeled apart. One man twitched forward and froze when a harpoon tip appeared, not thrust, just present like a boundary. Then came the punishment that didn't spill blood. The elder spoke, and hunters removed the posse's extra comforts: tobacco, a flask, thick mitts, even the leader's new scarf. Not enough to kill them, enough to make the walk back hurt, and to make the lesson physical. "You will leave with life," Aputi translated, "and with memory." The elder pointed to the dimming sky, then south. Aputi's eyes held the leaders. "You go now. No hunting people. If you return with more guns, the land will remember you before we do." Elias realized the elder wasn't improvising. This was Inuit Kojimajatu Kangit in motion, rules carried in breath and memory. Keep anger from infecting the group. Keep weapons from deciding faster than minds. Keep the hungry from becoming desperate. No victory shout, no taunting. The men were made small without being murdered, the way winter makes you small. The bundle wasn't random either. Aputi tied it with the same careful knots he'd seen at his door. "It goes to the ones who can't hunt today," she murmured. "An elder with cracked hands, a boy with fever, a family whose lamp oil ran low. Here, sharing isn't praised. It's how people stay alive." Elias expected a final insult, a spite shot into the air. Instead, the leader gathered his papers with shaking hands and tucked them away as if hiding them from the snow. He nodded once, small, bitter, and turned his men toward the trail. As they walked, the ring opened just enough to let them pass, then closed behind them, silent as a door. Ravens circled high, patient, and Elias felt the truth settle. Justice without blood can still cut deep. When the last boot crunch faded, Aputi did not smile. She looked at Elias's threshold, at the 2 knots, and said quietly, "Now you are seen. That is also danger." The quiet after the posse left felt heavier than their boots. Elias watched the trail swallow them, watched the snow erase the last angry footprints as if it was tired of the argument. Inside, his table held flour, tea, and grease, justice without signatures. The elder remained, and the hunters stayed spread in patient geometry. No cheers, no triumph, only a calm that made Elias feel smaller than he ever had. He stepped forward alone and opened his hands. In his palm lay a cord braided from sinew and dyed thread, dark and red, with a small carved charm at its center, bone shaped into a simple inuksuk, smoothed by thumbprints. Around it were tiny beads, not bright glass from the posts, but carved caribou and ivory pieces, uneven in a way that proved a person made them. Aputi translated, "This is not magic. It is a name without words." The elder spoke again. "When people see this, they know you were judged. They know you chose Inungwinik, being human. They know you did not buy safety with betrayal." Elias stared at the braid, a token of safe passage, like an inuksuk on the tundra, a marker that says, "This way is true." Among Inuit, symbols were agreements carried openly. Who is trusted? Who has obligations? Out here, reputation traveled faster than a sled. He reached out, then hesitated. "If I wear it, will it keep them away?" Aputi's eyes held his. "It will keep some away," she said. "And it will bring others." The elder's gaze hardened slightly, not with threat, with honesty. "The Kalunat with papers will call you different," Aputi translated. "They will say you are gone from your own people. They will say traitor because you did not sell us. They will not understand you only gave water. Protection that saved him today could paint him tomorrow." Still, Elias took the braid. The cord was warm from the elder's palm, and the charm pressed into his skin like a promise that could not be returned. Aputi tied it around his wrist with practiced fingers. The knot was simple, strong, the kind used on sled lashings and harpoon lines. "Pilirika tigiinik," she murmured. "We do together. Now you are part of a story." The ring dissolved as quietly as it had formed. Hunters melted back into spruce shadow, leaving no noise, only faint runner lines the next wind would hide. The elder touched 2 fingers to Elias's wrist, acknowledgement not ownership, and turned away. For 3 days, the land felt almost normal. Elias ran his traps. Ravens watched from familiar perches. Then, on the 4th day, he followed the trade route toward the nearest post to barter pelts, and he felt the world change again. At the edge of the settlement, a boy saw the braid on Elias's wrist and ran. A man on the porch stopped mid-laugh. Eyes followed Elias like rifle sights. Someone whispered Kalunat. Another voice added sharper, "Gone native." A woman selling lamp oil pulled her child close as he passed. On the wall of the storehouse, a fresh notice flapped, ink, seals, and the same proud phrasing, "Authority, order, detain." Elias caught his own name spoken like a stain. In the saloon corner, men muttered that the patrol leader had been embarrassed, and embarrassed men didn't forgive. They paid. The clerk's smile was thin as ice. "Heard you had visitors," the man said, not asking. "Heard you sent the patrol the wrong way." Elias's throat went dry. The braid on his wrist suddenly felt heavier than a trapper's chain. Outside, a dog began to bark, one, then another, until the sound became a warning chorus. And down the trail beyond the last drift came the faint crunch of boots returning, more than before. Weeks passed, and the braid on Elias's wrist stopped being odd and became evidence. He kept to his trapline, traded only when he had to, and spoke less than ever. But the frontier returns what you try to outrun. One grey afternoon, he found boot tracks again, heavy, confident, cutting across his old sled grooves. They arrived at dusk, the same patrol leader, more men than before, and 2 strangers in cleaner coats who carried ink like a weapon. They halted outside the cabin as if collecting a debt. The leader nodded at the Inuksuk charm. "There," he said. "You see it. He's with them." Elias stood in the doorway alone, hands empty. He looked weak on purpose, shoulders rounded, voice quiet, no allies visible. The leader mistook it for surrender. "You cost us supplies," the leader said. "You shamed the company. Tonight you make it right. You point to the camps, or we burn this place and leave you to the wolves." Elias felt fear rise, then settle into something colder. Aputi's question returned. "When nobody sees you, who are you?" Now both worlds were watching, and the answer had to match. "There are no thieves here," he said. "Only men who use paper to excuse hunger." One of the strangers unfolded a document. "By lawful authority—" A raven cut him off, calling close. Another answered from the ridge. The leader forced a laugh. "Birds." Elias lifted his wrist, letting the charm catch the last light. "You think this makes me yours to punish," he said. "It proves you were seen." The leader's face tightened. He signaled, and 2 men moved to flank the cabin. Elias stepped back as if retreating, drawing them onto the packed snow beside his woodpile, the patch he had quietly hardened and cleared for weeks. Weakness, he had learned, could be bait. The first man lunged. Elias didn't punch. He shifted. The man's boot hit the slick spot, and he went down hard, rifle skittering. The second stumbled to help and lost his footing too. A trap that didn't kill, only exposed. The leader swore and raised his gun. That was when the Arctic answered. White turned into movement. Figures surfaced along ridges and between spruce trunks, calm and spaced, closing angles without rushing. Not a mob, a shield. The strangers with papers went pale. Aputi stepped forward first, English sharp now. "Put it down," she said. "No fear trade." The elder appeared behind her, eyes like stone under frost. He spoke one sentence in Inuktitut. The ring tightened by half a step. The leader's gun lowered. Spite remained. "He's not Inuit," he hissed. "He's a traitor." Aputi didn't blink. "He gave water," she said. "That is not betrayal. That is being human." The elder gestured toward the trail south. Aputi translated calm as snowfall. "You leave. You do not return. If you do, you will walk without guns, without comfort, and without lies. The North remembers. Men who survive learn when pride becomes suicide." One by one, the posse backed away, eyes scanning the ridges for a gap that wasn't there. They left with life and with shame, papers tucked away like useless charms. When the last boot crunch faded, Elias understood the twist that would follow him forever. He wasn't protected because he was strong. He was protected because he proved once that he could be trusted with someone else's life. The elder touched the braid on Elias's wrist. Aputi translated softly, "Kindness is not free. It becomes a story. Stories become roads." After that, travelers began finding small stone markers near thin ice, caches left untouched, safe paths hinted by quiet signs. At distant posts, men whispered about a weak trapper who was untouchable, not by bullets but by consequence. Elias returned to his line, quieter than ever, yet no longer invisible.